teach and learn culture, whether it's ethnic, whether it's native, whether it's social. I truly believe that, if we all just understand a little bit about each other, we're all be better. We can all go to longs. We can all get along. But of course, because this is a cultural show, and before I introduce my guest, I got to preempt what I'm about to do. So I've had some of my kupuna watching the show, and they said, "Oh, Makana, it's a culturized show, right?" I said, "Yes." They go, "Oh, so where's your protocol?"
Got him.
Right? Ke le maila ko ke kai ke mahala malama ua mahali e a mali bagai nu vai ke inu maila na halo na we ke kai no na we ta hala no puna tawahine no talua no I hila we aloha aloha kako e aloha e. My friends, Kimeona Kane, how are you, brother?
Mai ka'i, mahalo.
I wanted to mahalo you first of all with ho'okupu. So this is as you probably know, for those of you that are listening in and watching, and a little umeke of pa'akai. Of course, you have it on you all the time, and some olena. It's just a simple. As a pikai or for your home, pa'akai and olena is very, very important to us when clearing a space or pikai or ho'opomaikai a place. So that is for you, for your home and forever, whoever else you need it for. mahalo. So mahalo for being here. And listen, since we're doing the whole hat backwards thing, I'm going to do this. All right. So what have you been up to?
Ooh,
I know it's a loaded question, so let me start by this, because this is culturized. You have ike, you have mana'o in culture. So speaking of Hawaii, what does culture mean to you? Just generally, what does culture mean to you?
Culture. Well, first and foremost, just mahalo for the opportunity to just learn with so many different elements going on. And of course, mahalo for this. It comes in so handy. Culture to me, culture is one of the many ways in which we identify, right? It's something that defines something else, and it's something that encapsulates, I think, the essence of what one wants to be or be a part of. And so there's certainly so much depth that you can dig into when it comes to culture, but the base for me is just how I choose to identify with something is the culture in which I want to display, right?
I like that. It's what you choose. So speaking of what you choose, what is within the Hawaiian culture and growing up, can you remember the first thing you had pili to? Was it kai? Was it the ocean? Was it hula? What was it? Do you remember?
Yeah, my family, my ohana, is a fishing family, and so clearly the first thing that I became pili to was the kai. It was understanding the kai. It was fishing in the kai, and my ohana from Kualoa even more so. So learning how to squid, learning how to pound squid, learning how to identify different things in the kai. I spent a lot of summers out there with my ohana in Kualoa, in Ka'aava, in Kahana, all kai-based related things. And while my regular home was in Waimānalo, I spent it up in the Mauka. So I had a good growing up in both elements, and really a good grounding of understanding how Makai to Mauka, Mauka to Makai works so well together.
I'm going to kind of generalize, but not a lot of people today, even Native Hawaiians, have that opportunity to live within, or actually not live within, but practice ahupua'a system, right, from the mountain.
Correct.
So growing up in the kai, and everything having to do, because I still want to get a lot more into that, though. You said you grew up in Waimānalo.
Yep.
Where did you go to school? Local. Hey, were you in high school?
I am a proud graduate of Kamehameha, Kapālama.
So far on this show, Kamehameha is beating everybody.
Ooh.
Everybody, which is
You
good,
gotta
though.
diversify your picks, brother.
I know. It always ends up like that, though. So if you're joining us, Culture Rise, if you're joining us on YouTube, thank you so much. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications. I'm sitting with Kimeona Kane, and we're going to dive into, and I literally dive into the culture of Aloha Aina, Malama Aina, and the Ahu Pua'a system. Yes, Kamehameha School grad. So those of you that are culture, that are outside of, please let me know. So thank you for being here. We are going to get into the ocean right now. This is Culturized. Bringing you what matters. Viewers can receive the Star Advertiser digital full access subscription for just $9.95 per month. Go to staradvertiser.com and click on subscribe. Use the code AHITHING. Bank of Hawaii. Welcome to tomorrow. Member FDIC. Mahalo for joining us. This is Culture Rise. I am so humbled. I'm privileged because this is one of those days that I love to learn. I'm continually a Haumana, a student, and I'm sitting with Kamehameha School grad. What year?
Lifer, by the way.
Are you serious?
2004.
So let's see. So
2004.
far, lifers I've had. There's you. There's Kilina, I think. Eldridge. See, I'm going to think about it. Lifers, because I always talk about this. Growing up on Lanai, I always had this view of Kamehameha school kids, right?
Yes.
I always wanted to be like that. But so Kamehameha School, you went to high school. When you got in, this is a question I always ask as well, and some people think it's weird. When did you realize you were Kanaka?
Ooh. I struggled with that growing up in a Christian home. And so the ideas of being Kanaka weren't as always easily expressed in home. We talked language, we spoke about different things, but there wasn't a lot of diving into those ideas through most of my childhood, through most of my youth. So it wasn't until my high school years where I started to realize, there's a lot more going on outside of my tiny little ranch life in Waimānalo. Wow. And to be very honest, it took me 30 years to get to an understanding of introducing myself back to culture. And so it wasn't until my 30s where I started to dive into culture as Kanaka. Yeah.
Interesting. And that was, a cognizant thought, like, this is why I was taught all these things. And on top of that, another question I always like to, and the conversation I like to have is, so you realized you were Kanaka. It took about 30 years. However, growing up, Waimānalo, Kualoa, all of Kualaupoko, all of Kualauloa, were your parents and your ohana, were they blatant about it? Okay, we're going to teach you this because this is who we are, or was it observation? Our kilo skills, right?
Right. It was a little bit of both, and it was depending on the setting. So on the weekends, I would be woken up bright and early by my grandmother. I was raised by my wonderful grandparents.
Oh, lucky.
And totally blessed, totally blessed. And from that, it was just, okay, get up, you're going to go fishing with Papa. So get up, load the Zodiac, freezing cold, right? Barely awake, trying to keep my eyes open as we're riding along out to Kailua boat ramp. Sometimes it'll be to He'eia boat ramp, just depends. And that was just kind of by force, right? Just get up, go. You're going with Papa. While we're out in the water, though, that's where it turned into kilo. That's where it turned into, okay, turn this, that's how you turn the boat, yeah? Move this fast, that's how we're gonna go. When we got into the water, there was very little talking with my grandfather. And it was just all watch what he does and try follow, Clearly, you cannot hold your breath like your kupuna can. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time, struggling back to the top of the water. Wow. And that was just the beautiful thing about how we engaged, was just you shared a little bit about how we connected with our kupuna. And that's it. You listened, you watched, you studied, and you just kind of kept to yourself, right?
Isn't it funny today that, so in that scenario, when we sit with our kupuna, not a lot of words are shared, right. Not a lot of conversations are shared, but there's so much communication going on.
Oh, absolutely.
In today's society, we would think, what's going on with because my grandfather always said, if you can sit on a couch with somebody and not say a word and be totally content, so much going on. Do you teach like that today?
I do. I do.
Okay.
I love the creation of chaos for my Haumana. I gotta tell you, the silence is it's deafening in terms of how much they can pick up if they're paying attention, right?
Yes. Kupuna always say that you're listening to the wrong noise. In the water, on the Zodiac, out with Tutukane, and you're there and you're fishing. How far back can you remember one of the first lessons where in your adult life you're like, that's what he meant?
Ooh,
I know there's a lot.
there is so many. One of the biggest things that we talked about was always how to watch the kai, and which way we're drifting in the kai, and how do we align ourselves with the ʻāina so that we know where we're going, how far we've gone. I tell you, to be able to sit on the shore now and just be able to watch the kai move before even getting into the kai was one of the biggest lessons learning when we're on the boat now floating across, the Kaneohe area. I can't remember how much importance it was then, but I can remember now being surrounded by kai all the time, how much value comes from just sitting on that boat and drifting.
Kilo skills.
Absolutely.
We're going to get into that right here in Culturized. This show was sponsored by Hawaiian Telcom, Hawaii's technology leader. For all your money needs, Hawaiian Financial Federal Credit Union is here for you. Visit hificu.com. That's hi-fi, letter C, letter U.com. So we're sitting here with my good friend Kimeona Kane, and we're talking kilo skills. And I think one of the greatest of the many, of all the knowledge that Kanaka have, kilo is always to me, I think first and foremost. And you sharing your stories about, it's funny, I can see you sitting in the boat. You have the kilo, your grandfather. You have to kilo the ocean. You have to kilo the ʻī'a. There's so much going on. For someone, let's just say we're talking to a visitor to Hawaii, and even some Kanaka, because there's not a lot of Kanaka, like they just gung-ho rush the water. How important is that sitting on the kahakai and just, like you just said, you got to watch the current, you got to watch the waves. How important is that, even if you're just going to jump in?
Yeah. The reality of how important that is comes down to life and death. It's so simple, right? It's so simple to grasp now. When you're sitting on the beach, you can go into 1 foot of water and easily drown in that. And so it doesn't get much more important than that to sit, especially in some place unfamiliar. Even if we spend our entire lives out in the kai, there's still the respect needed to be paid to Kanaloa. And so you're not better than Kanaloa, right? Your swimming skills will not be better than what Kanaloa has. And the humbling part of it is really in the acceptance of that learning and that skill set. And so if you're visiting not just Hawaii, but if you're visiting any space that you're not familiar with, it is a matter of life and death to sit and just study and make it important.
Do you just hear that? Kilo, wherever you go, and you're reading my mind, because Kanaloa, of course, we're surrounded. We're talking kilo, but I really wanted to get into the meat of what you do. We talk about the knowledge of Hawaiians, and kilo is one. We hear this term all the time, and still some people have a hard time. Aloha Aina, Malama Aina. In your mana'o, in your ike, explain that to somebody who, it's like, oh, I just love the land.
Right.
It was funny. So my son he's writing this book, believe it or not, but he calls me the other day from school. He says, Papa, what do you do for Aloha Aina? I thought it was going to come out of my head. I had to take a few minutes.
Absolutely.
Explain that to us.
Yeah.
Or because some people, no, it's Malama Aina, no, it's Aloha Aina. One and the same. I want to get into your.
Yeah, I really think that there is some comparisons in there, and then there's some severe differences. I think I've heard so many different mana'o from incredible Kanaka leaders over the years, and the way that I've taken that idea of Aloha Aina is this this true sense of love of land. And that can come in so many forms. It can come as a byproduct of Malama Aina. It can come or be the seed that becomes Malama Aina. And I think just the aloha that we carry, first and foremost, allows us to determine how our connection is going to be. And so without that Aloha Aina aspect, or just the aloha part, there's really a difficulty in the word of malama, because you're not connecting to something. Wow. So I go through that all the time. I'm reflecting on it a lot, especially if the action doesn't match the function of what we're doing. But Aloha Aina can be so many things. It's so broad from a practitioner standpoint to a cultural grounding standpoint to a behavioral standpoint, right? And that's where there's just so much fluidity in what aloha can be, and yet it's so grounding. And so it's tough. It's a tough question. It's a tough question to reflect on.
I really thought I was just gonna spew it out to my keiki, and I was like, I'm gonna get back to you on that. He goes, oh, and then in the same breath, he said, oh, and tell me what you do to Malama Aina. And literally, I was like, la'aulapa, I plant plants. He goes, Papa, what else? And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Now, Malama Aina, Aloha Aina, and we're gonna jump all over the place because I want to go now backwards. Kamehameha School, but you are right now with 808 Cleanups.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
If you're joining us on Culturize and you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification button. We're talking culture right now. We're sharing it, we're learning it, we're teaching it, the culture of Malama Aina, Aloha Aina, and everything in between on Culturize.
Culturize, brought to you by Beachside Roofing, the leaders. Poncho Solar. Poncho Solar has specialized in providing energy solutions throughout Hawaii since 1987. Call us at 808-773-7384.
Hey, welcome back. If you're joining us, this is Culturize. We are talking the culture of kai, kahakai, the ocean. Let's just say the ahupua, from the mountain to the horizon and everything in between. We're talking with Kimeona Kane about your iki and concept of Aloha Aina and Malama Aina. You're with 808 Cleanups. I just realized that I love the fact that 808 Cleanups is not just cleaning kahakai, but they have you and you're restoring cultural vahipana. Up until, how long have you been with them?
Only about 2 years now. 3 years.
Wait, hold on. And within that time, I watch you all of the East Side. What projects have you done so far?
We've done many. When you think about projects, I guess for me, it's like, what are we talking about? We talk about cultural restorations. Yes. So I've been just privileged to be a student of our spaces. And like I said, it took me 30 years to get to this space. So I have a lot of catching up to do, right? In that catching up, though, I've been blessed by so many different people who have come into my learning spaces, who are teaching me about spaces that they have. And one of the biggest goals that I had set out to accomplish through 808 Cleanups was just to get the support to these places. I could not see or bear to see our cultural places not be supported by volunteerism. And there's a lot of conversation around that, from protecting these spaces to what is the ano of the people that are coming in. And yet I just watch these places year after year just continue to not progress as much as I think it would if our kanaka were there. And so opening the door to that conversation was really easy, believe it or not, when you approach it in a way that says, I just want to serve this aina. Yeah. How can we serve this aina together?
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And I'm glad that you say that, because I'm always stuck in between that. The preserve, perpetuate practice.
Yeah.
There's some people that want to look at a vahipana or look at a cultural location and go, that was a fishing village, or that was but to me it's like, no, that is.
It still is.
And so when do we, and that's always the difficult thing to convince. And I'm glad you said it was easy, because a lot of times, and I'll be honest, in my opinion, sometimes there's kanaka that are like, no, don't touch it, just leave it.
Absolutely.
But so then the elements will just take it away.
Yeah.
And then we're done with it. We don't have anything. I'd like and so that reaction you got trying to restore these places was easy.
It was. Of course, it comes with the minor detail work and things. And clearly coming from a nonprofit, perspective versus a personal perspective, there's always a different opinion there. I can speak to my ohana, and my cultural ties to certain wahi. And then outside of that, it's like, but we're still stewards, right? And, when I look at how we engage these spaces, like you just said, I refuse to believe that we can only continue to learn about our spaces through someone's book. I cannot believe that,
Say it again.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's repeat that, yeah. I refuse to believe that we can only learn about these spaces through someone's book. There should be no reason why we cannot be out touching our spaces again. And what we're teaching right now is just how important these spaces are to us culturally, not what we're going to do for these spaces. It's about what these spaces are going to create for us. And I'm a huge advocate about getting back into this heiau and learning from different people who have an opinion about it, and we respect those opinions and we bring it to the forefront of conversation, and it's unfortunate to think that because we're ignorant to how things may have been, because we have no information from back then. What I love about the people that I'm circled by today is the answer is always, well, we're gonna make them then. Yeah, we're gonna make one protocol. That's beautiful. It's grounding. It speaks to just the ability to keep ourselves perpetuating, right? Ho'omaukela, just moving forward. It's awesome. It's awesome.
How's Ike bombs all over the place, and that so resonates because I always think about that. If you want more Ike bombs like that, and the concept of moving and ho'oulu our culture, we still can do it. We have to move forward. So if you're joining us on YouTube, hit the notification bell, subscribe. We are talking culture, whether it's ethnic, native, or social. And if you want to learn more, we got the extended version coming up. We're sitting with Kimeona Kane, and we are going deep into the kai and how to restore wahipana on Culturize. Hey, what's going on? Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Culturize. My name is Makani. If you're joining us, this is the extended version. This is where you get to jump on YouTube, hit the notification bell, subscribe right now, because if you want to learn anything about culture, the culture of Hawaii and all the cultures, not just native, not just ethnic, not just social, this is the place to do it. If you sometimes, we have people that sit on the fence, and we talked earlier about it took you 30 years to realize, I am Kanaka. Sometimes we're too afraid. Oh, I'm too old already. We can always learn. So thank you for joining us in the extended version. We're going to get back on topic, restoring wahi. Now, you're with 808 Cleanups, but specifically cultural sites. You're at, we call it the Shriners Building. Mm-hmm. What is that place called?
Great. So that was the fishing village of Kukui.
Kukui
is that fishing village, yes. And so we want to use those inoa, bring them back, because it's not the Shriners Beach, right?
Real quick, if you're joining us, is that by the Magnum PI house?
The old Magnum PI house.
So if you folks are wondering, you're watching somewhere outside of Hawaii, the old Magnum PI, right? That whole area is Kukui.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, keep going. So that's Kukui, and you folks are there currently right now.
Yeah, we are there by the good, wonderful graces of the Waimānalo Limuhui, who started this project back in 2017 or so. And the effort was to bring Waimānalo people into that space for limu, and that's how it started. And being a Waimānalo resident, being connected to the kai, it just made so much sense to come back into that space and to kokua the work there. And so I'm a part of the Waimānalo Limuhui as well, and that's what really kick-started my learning in terms of Fishpond work, in terms of rock work, and cultural work. That's really what gave me the platform to now, or the foundation now to stand on. And so I owe a lot of it to what they created, what our Kupuna envisioned for that space, and how it moved me to where we are today. And so it is a blessing. Kukui.
I don't think you guys realize how blessed he is to be there every single day. So Kukui. And before that, this is another thing that I notice about you. I know you're always in the kai, right? Mm-hmm. That rock wall that you're building at Kukui, that's not a local ia, is it?
It's considered a local i'a. Its function, though, as we've learned it, was to house turtles. So it was a honu pond.
Interesting.
And, the mo'olelo that speaks of how the chief of that space, some know him as Kui, some know him as Kukui, and his chiefess Pahonu. They are the ones that had that pond commissioned. And when you think about fish pond history, everything goes back 800 to 1,000 years to, when Ku'ula built the first fish pond on Maui, and Ai, his son, traveled the ʻāina to establish this practice. Pahonu is one of those ponds and spaces that have really morphed over the years from the concept of local i'a, which would have encompassed everything, including honu and sea cucumbers and limu and stuff. So
that pahonu, and this is always, I don't even want to say it's a controversial question to Kanaka. Was that created also because they were going to Ai honu?
Holole. Yeah, so that ali'i had a love for turtle meat, and that was his personal pond. It was his personal refrigerator, and that was what its primary function was back then. Yeah.
So here's something I think of all the time, and maybe you can answer this, because I always say, when you save one species, right? We got to save the turtle, which is going to throw everything else off balance, right? And I always think, well, maybe that's why we don't have as much limu anymore.
Right.
Is that part of the reason why? Or
to me, no.
Because there's so much turtles now. There's so much honu. Do you think they should let us eat honu?
Ooh, that's a loaded one.
It's, again, that personal culture, right?
I think in other Polynesian cultures, it is there. It's present in their diet. In Hawaiian culture, to what I've learned, it was really a chiefly class kind of privilege.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so it wasn't as consumed regularly by just the normal person. It was a chiefly class kind of me'ai. And so today, there are people that have eaten it in other places and are like,
I love it.
Yeah. And to back to the point of, is there a disbalance or an unbalance right now happening? The biggest thing that comes to our limu in my experiences, in my short experiences, is just habitat loss and then the lack of fresh water. So the kai has to have the vai, and without that simple but delicate imbalancement of just all of those things, we don't have the limu that we would have had prior.
Another thing people don't realize, say it again, the kai needs the vai.
Correct.
Vai meaning fresh water, and it happens because there's so much development on ʻāina, on land, so that takes away that fresh water.
The channelized.
Everything. I'm loving all this because there's so many things I want to ask you about and talk to you about and get into your ike. But here's another thing. So I was going back to you're always in the ocean, but that's not true because you are actually in the kuahivis. You're restoring. I'm trying to visualize where you are. Kaimuki, no.
Kaimuki?
Is it Kaimuki? Yep. Is that the fire station?
Above the fire station, correct.
What are you doing over there? Because all I remember was when I passed by, I think, there's just kind of an empty space. Was that a park? I don't know if it's a park. It's a space. I don't know if it's a space. What is that?
There's a lot of debate right now about what it is. It's again another vahipana idea that comes from our kupuna, but we don't have the maps of what it would be. Yeah, and so there's some mana'o that it was kukueo napeha heiau. Right, wayfinding heiau.
Wow.
Right, when you think of kukuyo napeha, the light of the napeha star, the view from up there is 360 degrees. You can see the entire
Serious?
Kai. Yes, beautiful
I pass
space.
this thing all the time. I had no idea.
Yeah, and it's on the crater rim of Pu'u o Kaimuki. So there's a lot of kauna in that space. Other people don't believe that was the site, and there's different mana'o. What we're doing there with 808 cleanups and with the Kaimuki community and with the volunteers that come out every single week is we are simply restoring rock work. Is it a heiau? Hard to say, right? But we're implementing cultural practice with rock weaving, Uhau Humu Pōhaku, and teaching people how important that foundation of rock work is in our everyday life. People don't realize how much rock was like in everything we did, right? And so the restoration there really was about creating a space again for the community to thrive in. And it's a dog park at Pu'u Kaimaki. But more importantly, it's turned into a symbol of how powerful community is. And it's huge. It's huge. And we had a beautiful mural put in with Solomon Enos recently.
I've seen that.
And it's just a continual perpetuation of ideas and culture and
blowing my
community.
mind of, because I commend you for what you do, because I can see, like you said, some people say maybe it was a hail, maybe it wasn't a vahipana, but 100 years from now, some kid is going to have somebody's going to have a podcast talking about history and culture, and they're going to say, yes, remember Kimeona Kane and his hui. They created this space. With that said, now, building rock walls and how important rocks are. I've run into this before as well, being from the island of Lanai. If you go far, Kawakahiko, when they were building rock walls, when they were building Aloha Nui, did they have to get permission from somebody to get pohaku?
You know, that's a good question. And I don't know if I have the right answer.
Yeah.
When we think about rock, it's no different than any other resource that we would have.
Okay.
So if you think about that, yes, you're going to have to ask permission. Who we're asking permission to is going to be different. Is it a konohiki? Is it an akua? Is it the aumakua? Is it all of them? Yeah. Is it the ali'i? So the way that I have been learning under my Kumu Kinohi Pizarro has been simply with the idea that yes, you always go and ask permission, not just to take, but to repurpose that material into something different. Yeah, you're taking an element out of that space and you're redoing it somewhere else. So you're changing the function sometimes, and what we are continuously learning is what feels pono. Yeah, what feels pono.
Say it again.
Yeah.
What feels pono?
What feels pono?
Because so much of us are trying to be pono.
Correct.
How about just what feels pono? And because I always think about that when I watch you folks, and you're using pohaku, because there's always going to be that little bit of controversy, right?
Right.
Oh, you cannot touch those pohaku; they're sacred. I was like, yeah, but they've been sitting there for a while. Let's use it for something
Honor
else.
them.
Yeah. Just like how when they make pohaku ku'i'ai, right?
Correct.
So I always wondered that. So. Is there protocol that goes into that? So, say you're rebuilding and you go to a wahi, there's pohaku everywhere. Now, you as a kanaka, do you know that is there protocol, and is there only certain rocks? Do you treat it like when you pick la'au? I'm only going to take a few. Say there could be 1,000 rocks. I'm only going to take 2 or 3.
I think it's really going to depend on what we're building. You know, so granted, if you are in a space, now one of the biggest key components in this idea is no different than ahupua'a. You're not going to go take from another ahupua'a and put it into yours, right? Yeah. And there's a beauty in that as well, though, because we also implement this practice, and we've learned this through our friends at Paipai'ohe'eia. Wherever you come from, your wahi, your ahupua'a, your home, bring a rock. Yeah, bring a rock and weave it into this wall. And that pilis all of us, all of our spaces as one pai'aina. Yeah. And so there's a lot of learning when we think about what is, what should be, what can be. I think we're at a point where we recognize there are processes and protocols that are expected. And then there's flexibility in what is pono? Yeah. What is pono?
I'm totally soaking all this in right now. Because there's just questions in the back just going off. I love that as well. You bring something from your ahupua'a, your moku, and it's going to pili all of us together. Now, what a lot of okay, we go back to the question that my keiki had asked me. Oh, what do you do for Aloha? What would it take? What's the thought process for somebody to be a steward of the land? What's the simplest thing in your mana'o that someone can do to be a steward?
Whether it's through Aloha, whether it's through stewardship, the simplest thing is just to be present. Yeah, to be present in that ʻāina. And remember, our ʻāina is not marked by just this boundary. It extends far out, right? And so just to be present, give yourself the time to be present in that ʻāina, and you're going to learn all the things you need to learn, how to aloha it, how to mahalo it, how to be in that space and how to thrive in that space. Yeah. Because
we do sometimes, the older we get, like we're talking about, sometimes we get to the point, it's like, oh, I old already. I old, right? So like when people ask me, oh, do you olala Hawaii? I said, yeah, like maybe Papa Ekolu level, because my son is Papa, and that's it. But we always have this in the back of our head that I cannot learn. But the fact that you're just being present, even if you don't get into the kai, if you don't just stand there, and then eventually you can learn.
Yeah, you're not always going to pull you. You know, those elements are going to pull you into a space of being and existence. And that's going to give you the direction in which to operate, right?
Before we let you go, because I know you got to get back into the kai. and if you folks are joining us, I got to say, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if Kimeona's going to show up in his malo.
Right? It's packed and ready to go. I'm overdressed compared to you today.
I was going to say, it's funny though, right? Because even right now, I have a malo. You always have to have one, right?
Yes,
Kupuna always says, have a malo in your car. Have a malo in your car. And it's funny because I have one and people always, what is that?
Yeah.
I go, it's my malo. They're like, what? So I know you got to get back into the water, but before we let you go, here's something current I wanted to ask you.
Sure. It
was just in the news because you work in local ia and work in the kai. That rich guy just bought some land, and it includes a local ia, right?
Yep.
How is that possible? Or I know it's possible because he did it, but would you approach that person and say, "Hey, let me malama this"?
You know, there's a strong conversation I think that has to happen amongst not just the lahui, but amongst all that make Hawaii home. And it's the idea that follows the olala no iao, that really takes us back to the idea of not selling land. We have to stop selling Hawaii land, you know, and that's a hard one. That's a hard one to put into practice. It's a hard one to manage as far as what's taking place. As far as what would be done in those circumstances where someone has bought land, the wish that I would have is that individual would recognize the host culture, would understand the need of the host people to access those spaces. And if not, well, we're going battle. You know, we're going battle. And it doesn't go without the aloha, though. Yeah, it's because of the aloha we have that we're going battle.
Okay. Wow. I eventually want to bring it. There's so much more that I could there's tons of things because as natives, again, we think we're doing enough.
Right.
We're never really doing enough. So we're going to leave you guys with this. If we, as Kanaka, we go to the beach, we go to the mountains, we go hiking, even those that are visiting Hawaii, a lot of times we don't realize the damage we're doing to ʻāina.
Correct.
What are things you're finding that we, as natives and also visitors, are doing to this ʻāina that we're maybe not aware of?
There's a huge trend that's picked up in the last decade or so, and it's this idea of getting outdoors. Yeah, we're going to go holo up Mauka. Okay. The problem, though, stems from people utilizing social media to highlight these places. So by tagging these places, we're destroying these places. Yeah. Being outdoors, I didn't realize at the time when people were like, hey, you got to get outdoors, go to the beach. And wow. So I always say stop geotagging. Yep. Right? Absolutely.
There's got to be, is there anything in legislation right now that you know of that like would when people coming to Hawaii, I always think when people come to Hawaii on the plane, they have that questionnaire, right?
Right.
They should have some kind of an agreement or some kind of, because you rarely see it. You know, you travel, you fly back into Hawaii. There's a lot of marketing. Hey, visit this place. But there's rarely anything that says, maybe don't go outside.
Right.
Maybe stay on your hotel property. Is there anything in legislation right now that does that? Say, oh, you cannot, I don't know, have access to these certain areas?
Not that I know of, as far as public access to these spaces, but let's manifest it. Let's put it into action, because It's what will become the determining factor as far as our ability to preserve home. Yeah. To preserve the aloha that we have for our ʻāina.
The question I wanted to ask you earlier was, I see there's a lot of people that come help you.
Yes.
Right? A lot of volunteers. And I'm not putting it down, but of all those people, how many Kanaka are there? Because I've run into this problem. I went home to my island and I've tried to do cleanups. Maybe one or two.
Right.
Maybe one or two natives of that land come.
Yeah. I agree. I think that I haven't seen a lot of Kanaka presence in our spaces, yeah, in the realms of which I've worked in recently. We know they're there. Mm-hmm. We know that they love ʻāina. That's not questioned. Right. Maybe the struggle for me is, are we connecting in the right level? Yeah. So if you're coming to this idea of stewardship, you know, are we doing this for the betterment of Hawaii, or is it just the clout, or what is it? Yeah. And I go through this a lot because I'm not one to pick and choose who can come with me and who cannot. Granted, our cultural spaces deserve the honor of a cultural space, right? Therefore, if you're coming and you're not of Kanaka bloodline, understand that, yeah? Understand that you're going to be put through cultural protocol, and it makes you uncomfortable. You sit in your uncomfortability. That's your choice, right? Yet, if we're not willing to give, you know, the accessibility to people, we always going to have the struggles that we've been running into, where we just have a small hui of people, right? Our kupuna were there. They did it. The next generation, maybe next generation, they left, right? They left Hawaii, they left the practice, they left whatever. And I think it's just generational. I think we've slowly disconnected ourselves from culture. Remember, it took me 30 years to connect to culture. Right. So I don't hold judgment to that. But I do create space and opportunity equally for anybody that wants to come, because these spaces cannot preserve without the hands that come to touch it.
Furthest away someone has come to Kokua, you folks. You get a lot of visitors, right?
We do have a lot of visitors, yes. So, you know, Japan, a lot of the Asian continent. We have one that is visiting us from Switzerland, you know, that does the dirty work. He goes and cleans Hawaii, and he's visiting from Switzerland, and that just blows my mind. And that was the reason why I got involved with 808 cleanups.
Did 808 cleanups always have a cultural component?
No, it didn't always have a cultural component. It was something that was created in the belief system of people who saw Hawaii and was like, why is Hawaii so dirty? Yeah, and they made a decision. But it was because I was ashamed that they were coming to my community to clean it that I got involved with it. I said, no, we go clean them myself.
Brother, mahalo for taking the time away from taking care of our ʻāina. If you're joining us on YouTube, thank you so much. This is Culturized. Hit the notification bell, subscribe, because if you want to learn some things about culture, this is the place to do it. Culturized. Aloha.